In this episode, we are talking about the 6 pillars of human connection as outlined by the Surgeon General, how to treat relationships with clients and customers who become friends, and then how to make friends as an entrepreneur. So let's dive into the show. Welcome back to the Travis Makes Friends podcast. Today's another episode, another installment, if you will, of Make Friends with Travis, where we talk about this loneliness epidemic and we talk about how we can try to solve it, the things that we can be doing on a personal level to make more friends, better friends, higher quality friends, and to invest back into our relationships. So in this episode, we're talking through the 6 pillars of human connection. If you are new to these solo shows, so we've been talking a little bit about this for the last few weeks, and there is a big report that was put out by the Surgeon General that was literally like saying, hey, this is a crisis level problem that we have to take care of, and put out this massive report. And so the last few weeks we've been kind of going through all the problems, the data that they found, the stuff that they put out there about the physical health effects of loneliness and the social isolation. We defined loneliness versus social isolation. We learned that being lonely or being socially isolated has the ability to impact you worse than smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day, which is pretty crazy. So there's a lot of things that we've talked about so far, and now this is the part of the report that the Surgeon General goes into to talk about. Here are the ways that we can help promote human connection and avoid human isolation. So I want to talk through these a little bit, and then also give my thoughts on a few of them, talk about what I think might be missing, and also while understanding that this is a government report from a government agency. So the way that they suggest to solve problems sometimes I think isn't actually going to solve the real problem, but I completely understand that the context in which they're writing it. So before we jump in here, I'm going to pop one of these Zins. Okay, no judging. I don't want to hear any judging from anybody out there. I can feel your judgmental eyes looking at me through the camera right now. This is a judge-free zone. All right, so let me just enjoy my Zin in peace. I'm new to these, by the way, but man, they're kind of helpful. I'm not going to lie. Maybe a little too helpful. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. Pillar number 1, strengthen social infrastructure in local communities. Social infrastructure refers to the programs such as volunteer organizations, sports groups, religious groups, member associations, etc., policies like public transportation, housing, and education, and the physical elements of a community such as libraries, parks, green spaces, and playgrounds that support the development of social connection. So strengthen social infrastructure in local communities, which is the programs, the policies, and the physical elements of the community. Now, the downside, I think, to some of these, especially this first pillar, is it's like a no duh. It's like an obvious thing, strengthen social infrastructure. But how do we actually quantify that? This is a really subjective thing. Strengthen social infrastructure. Okay, define strengthen. What do we actually need to do? And how does this work its way down from a federal level warning from the Surgeon General all the way down to a local community that actually has the ability to put in new parks or take care of their libraries or help out volunteer organizations or sports groups and things like that. So it's not really like a debatable thing. The local communities that we're engaged in need to become a priority for all of us. And that was part of the American dream, leading up to the last couple of decades is you felt pride and ownership because more people were able to buy houses back then, even though interest rates were 10, 12, 14, 16%. The houses were 60 grand. So you felt like you could own a little bit of a piece of America. And then that ownership, I think, gave you a little bit more pride in the community, and it brought people together. And you had neighbors looking out for each other. You could go borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor down the street. You had that it takes a village mentality with the neighborhood kids. Everybody knew each other, and the kids knew each other, and they all cared about the advancement of the community as a whole. And that's kind of fallen apart in a lot of ways now. In depending on where you live, for sure, if you're on the coasts, it's going to be far more exaggerated in terms of a problem. But yeah, this one to me is just like not one of those debatable things. It just has to get better. And relying again on the government to do these types of things, I think Obviously, we want that to happen. And especially for those communities that are not apt to make headway in these regards. But ultimately, it's going to be a personal responsibility thing. And especially if you're on the coasts, if you're in LA and San Francisco or New York or Florida, and you're in these areas where things are starting to just get overpopulated and there's an abundance of people around, it can be sometimes really difficult to foster this sense of local community. So be self-aware, understand where you are, ask yourself why you are where you are. If it's possible or doable, maybe consider moving to a place that would give you the ability to have a stronger local community. If that's not an option for you, then figure out ways to engage with the local community that you have. Be that person who's setting those things up, because strengthening social infrastructure in local communities is a necessary pillar, especially as it relates to the good of the country overall. So pillar one, I thought started off kind of weak. I mean, it starts off strong because local communities are everything, but like I said, it just didn't give, it was just like no duh, we need to like invest in social infrastructure for local communities. But again, quantify that. Tell me what that means. Is there a number of parks? Is there a saturation in populated areas that we want to reach, that we want to attain? Is there any data that can tell us what would be more likely to be successful? What are some more tangible things that we can get from that? Was the only question that I had. Pillar two, enact pro-connection public policies. Policymakers understand that while the effects of social connection may be most evident for health, the drivers of connection and disconnection can be found in all types of policies, from transportation and zoning to nutrition and labor. A connection in all policies, quote unquote, approach recognizes that every sector of society is relevant to social connection, and that policy within each sector may potentially hinder or facilitate that connection. Conversely, the government has a responsibility to use its authority to monitor and mitigate the public health harm caused by policies, products, and services that drive social disconnection. So look, I'm typically a less government kind of guy. And there's some obvious measures that should be taken to, undo the damage the government has already created, especially in the health department. And, even the health books that I was taught growing up are still teaching the food pyramid and telling you to eat more grain than anything else throughout the day, which is wild. I have to imagine that has something to do with Kellogg's and some of these other massive cereal brands. And I'm glad to see that there's a lot of organizations and there's people out there like Jesse Itzler and a few others who've led the charge against the just complete and utter blatant misinformation that these companies are spreading about, how good Fruit Loops are for you. It's honestly really ridiculous. It's crazy that growing up, I thought that Lucky Charms weren't that bad for you because they were approved by the American Heart Association. It has the seal on the side, and it's like, okay, well, clearly Lucky Charms, they're not that bad, Mom. You know what I mean? Look at that whole grain in the little white parts that I'm mostly avoiding so I can get to the marshmallows. But that's neither here nor there. The American Heart Association approved it, Mom, so we should be good. It's crazy that Lucky Charms and those things are marketed as breakfast foods, but Pop-Tarts, really Post Pop-Tarts are part of a good, healthy, balanced, nutritious diet for kids. And then you wonder why these kids are, can't sit still in class or focus. It's like you just gave them a carb log of a carb sheet of paper for breakfast full of sugar and then covered in sugar, frosted sugar on the top, and then sent them to school, and then probably gave them a glass of milk because it's good for your bones or whatever. And I'm not trying to vilify all milk. I'm a big milk drinker myself, and I definitely was growing up. But you don't realize how much sugar is in milk too. In a single cup, I think it's like 12 grams of sugar or something like that. You add on top of that the fact that you ate a Pop-Tart, and then if you're a bigger kid, like I was, you had 2 of the Pop-Tarts because they come in a sleeve. And so that tells you that, hey, I can't be eating just one of these. I got to eat both of them. So you're going to school with just hopped up on sugar, no actual nutrition, and then you can't sit still or focus, and people wonder why. So what do? You send them to a psychiatrist and you get them a script for amphetamines. And basically you're just giving your kids a diet of meth and sugar and then wondering why they're acting up all the time. So in this case, I agree that the government has quite a bit of work to do on this front to actually be honest with the public, and not give in to these lobbyists who stand to lose a ton of money by the government being honest with us about the types of food that we should be eating. It's been going on for far too long. So I agree with a lot of this. Policymakers should be looking at this as a connection in all policies approach, because social connection is also a not one size fits all. What's the phrase I'm looking for? Social connection is the answer to a lot of these problems as in terms of a root cause, as we've already seen in the last couple of weeks. That it can affect your physical health, that can affect your mental health, that can affect your emotional health. That it has the ability to that connections, friendships, relationships have the ability, not just have the ability, but are actually the thing that's most likely to make us, happy and fulfilled in life. So the only solution to me seems like a connection in all policies approach. But when you have a connection in all policies approach, it also means it's going to be way more difficult, because every time you get a new branch of government or a new sector of government involved, it just adds an additional layer of bureaucracy, an additional layer of red tape, and makes it less likely that things are actually going to get done. So enact pro-connection public policies. I agree with that, and I agree that the government has a lot of making up to do on what it means to actually be healthy in society, especially as it relates to social connection. Pillar number 3, mobilize the health sector. Social connection is an independent protective factor, and social isolation and loneliness are independent risk factors for several major health conditions, like we've already seen, including cardiovascular disease, dementia, depression, and premature mortality from all causes. Still blows my mind. Increase in all-cause mortality just from social isolation and loneliness. While all organizations have a role in addressing social connection, mobilizing the health sector, most notably healthcare delivery systems and the public health community, is a core pillar of the national strategy. It is critical that we invest in healthcare provider education on the physical and mental health benefits of social connection, as well as the risks associated with social disconnection. We must also create systems that enable and incentivize healthcare providers to educate patients as part of preventative care. That one thing would do wonders. But I understand that this is like written from the perspective of a government agency trying to enact a national strategy to take care of a big problem that we're facing. I just can't wrap my mind around how this is actually going to take place, how it's actually going to happen. I just had a conversation recently with Dr. Judith Joseph. She's a psychiatrist. She's an MD. She's an MBA. Very, very intelligent woman. Just wrote a book on high-functioning depression. And I had this whole conversation yesterday, and she was talking about how when she was earning all these letters behind her name, that she was able to get a couple of grants that enabled her to travel internationally and study these things abroad in different countries as well. And she said the difference between our healthcare system and other healthcare systems is that a lot of other healthcare systems, other countries, are designed to look at the individual from a holistic, like 360-degree perspective, whereas here it's siloed into, this department, that department, this department, that department. And if you go to your doctor is not going to mention anything about social isolation or loneliness or any of those things. They're just going to talk about what drugs they can give you. They're not even going to talk to you about the preventative part of what they do. They're not even going to talk to you about how to prevent cardiovascular disease, how to prevent dementia. It seems like their core responsibility is just treating things that already exist and not helping prevent those things from happening in the first place, which is crazy because the majority of these big killers that we've been talking about, heart disease and diabetes and cancer and dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these things are like the best cure that we have for them is early detection and prevention. That is the best cure. Once you have them, once you have diabetes, it's difficult to deal with the repercussions of that, to get rid of it. Once you have cancer, especially if it's in a later stage, we're so limited in what we can do to get rid of it that it blows my mind that we're not doing enough to talk about how to prevent those things. So let's see. This can be accomplished both within the medical system by linking individuals to community-based organizations that can provide necessary support and resources specifically designed to increase social connection. This is the one part I liked about this. Public health organizations can help track the community prevalence of social disconnection, promote individual best practices, and advance community solutions. So look, it obviously needs a shakeup, but my personal opinion is that I'm just not sure that our healthcare problems are going to be solved by more government. There's already too much bloat, too many committees, too much wasted capital, and we already have a system that's set up to incentivize earning money rather than incentivizing preventing disease. And I think some of those are the downsides of capitalism. And look, I'm a capitalist through and through. I'm an entrepreneur, and I believe capitalism is the best system that we have available to us in the world. However, to turn a blind eye to the deficiencies of capitalism is to suggest that we don't have room for improvement. And that's something that I completely disagree with as well. All this bloat, the committees, wasted capital, all at the expense of taxpayers. And then after all of that, you end up with something that's, less efficient than the DMV. So I highlighted this last piece more than anything because to me, it's much more effective, use of funds and taxpayer dollars to have these organizations mostly just start to track and report the data a little bit more effectively, to help researchers come up with data sets and come up with potential solutions and hypotheses to start running across these groups. And then ultimately, in my opinion, and again, I'm an entrepreneur, so it just kind of is something that I believe it's personal value of mine. I just think that entrepreneurs are going to be the ones who are going to be able to solve these types of problems. And they're going to do it much more efficiently in terms of dollars out and expenses out, because as an entrepreneur, you have to be more shrewd about those things. You don't have the ability to just go silo a section of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars from taxpayers to just go deploy at your own discretion. You actually have to solve a problem and prove that people want that problem, and then get those people to pay you to solve that problem for them. And I think ultimately that's probably going to be the thing that solves this. However, it's more difficult for those entrepreneurs to come up with solutions to the problem if the data is not clear. So that's why I highlighted that last piece, that public health organizations can help track the community prevalence of social disconnection, promote individual best practices, and advance community solutions. So, obviously, ideally, in a perfect world, if the government had all this stuff dialed in and they could just mobilize the health sector to start helping us with this, that would be ideal. Maybe I'm being pessimistic here, and maybe that's my bad, but I just don't see how that's possible in any sort of reasonable timeline, especially to negate the current effects that we're feeling on a mass scale right now. So, mobilize the health sector was pillar number 3. Pillar number 4, reform digital environments. Reform digital environments. We must decide how technology is designed and how we use it. There are many ways to minimize harm. We must learn more by requiring data transparency from technology companies. This will enable us to understand their current and long-term effects on social connection and implement and enforce safety standards that ensure products do not worsen social disconnection. In a positive vein, we should support the development of pro-connection technology to promote healthy social connection, create safe environments for discourse, and safeguard the well-being of others. Finally, we need to recognize the unique aspects of digital technology that may differ from other modes of connecting socially. The modality of delivery matters and should be strategically and explicitly acknowledged and evaluated. There was one line in here of this whole pillar that I sectioned off because it was just kind of like thrown in as an aside. But, and again, I understand this is a government agency enacting a national strategy for this. So they're not just going to come out and be like, hey, it's on you guys. You guys have to fix this. They have to provide some sort of a strategy here. And I understand that. But this one little line that they just kind of threw in there, I thought was probably like, this is ultimately the solution. And that line is, this should be coupled with the public's greater ability to avoid or limit their own uses. When it's talking about technology. So that last piece, I think, is the most important piece. I think getting the government involved, again, I tend to be a less government kind of a guy. So getting the government involved in tech companies and what they can and can't create or what they have to disclose to the public, like it gets really muddy really quickly. I'm not suggesting that nothing should be done, but they mentioned the public's quote unquote greater ability to avoid or limit uses at the end as a side note, because it's a document put out by the Surgeon General. So of course it's the, here's what we do from a government standpoint thing, but it's right on the side note to me. Giving the government more control over a private enterprise, again, is a very slippery slope. It's never really a thing that the government takes power and then gives it back. They take it and then they normalize it and then they go take some more. So I'm really ultimately against a lot of these things about like the government stepping into private enterprise, even publicly traded companies, and deciding what they should be doing with their technology. I just think it's largely going to be up to us. It's going to be up to the end users, to the citizens, to put up safeguards in our own lives and our kids' lives, because this technology, it's not going away anytime soon. And frankly, it shouldn't go away anytime soon. It goes against everything American to me to progress technologically, to progress as a society, and then find that the progression caused some problems and then just shut off that progression completely, and to start limiting people's creative outputs in that regard. I think that that's damaging, and it's going to discourage more progress. It's going to discourage entrepreneurs from taking big leaps on their hypotheses, especially even when they work. So it's not going to go away anytime soon. The digital environments are going to be around for a very long time, and I think that it is just that one line coupled with the public's greater ability to avoid or limit their own uses. The bummer part about that is that it's not sexy. There's no magic pill for that. It requires work. It requires discipline. It requires each individual to come up with their own set of rules for themselves, for their families, and what works for them. And I understand that sometimes sucks. It's like, well, I didn't cause these, problems. I didn't advance these technologies. Why do I have to deal with solving these problems now? And it's like, well, if you want to be a part of a world where you can benefit from the advancement of technology, then you also have to be part of the world that decides how to combat the negative parts of that technology advancing. So, reform digital environments. Again, I know they're writing it from the government perspective, but I just don't think the government's the answer here. Pillar number 5, deepen our knowledge. This is probably my favorite point of all of the 6 pillars. As a next step, relevant stakeholders, including government, policymakers, practitioners, and researchers, should work together to establish a research agenda focused on addressing identified gaps in the evidence base, fund research at levels commensurate with the seriousness of the problem, and create a plan to increase research coordination. Fund research at levels commensurate with the seriousness of the problem. I am no doctor, I'm no PhD, I'm no academic, but from what I've heard, again, there's so much government bureaucracy and red tape around funding research. And so that's one thing that I think is completely and directly related to the government having a hand in helping combat this crisis, is funding research at levels that are commensurate with the seriousness of the problem, because it just doesn't seem like anybody's taking this problem seriously. Most people would still agree that, smoking is a worse problem. And what we've already found doing this is like, actually it's not. And what's crazy about it is that, to me, it's much more insidious, because if you smoke, it's really easy to tell. You smell like smoke all the time. you're coughing. Your voice starts changing octaves as you get older. Your skin starts getting wrinkly. There's clear signs that you're smoking, and there's not clear signs that you're socially disconnected. There's not clear signs that you're lonely, and you could be the most connected, friendly, happy-go-lucky person in the world and still be suffering from these feelings of loneliness and depression. You see that, across the board with, examples like Robin Williams and people like that, where you just wonder what could have been different. And you start to realize that if that could happen to somebody like that, seemingly happy-go-lucky, friendly, nice, nobody has anything bad to say about this person, tremendous impact on the world around them, bringing happiness, bringing joy, bringing laughter to so many people, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of probably of people that Robin Williams touched, and suffering with the inner demons of loneliness. And that's what makes it, to me, a much, much more insidious problem than even smoking is. And so that's one thing I think is for sure something that the government could do to get involved, is fund research at levels commensurate with the seriousness of the problem. And then create a plan to increase research coordination. Deepening our knowledge of social connection and disconnection also requires us to further refine and expand our capacity to measure these states via agreed upon standardized metrics. This is kind of what I was referring to earlier. If you have a bunch of subjective terminology, then how do we know that we're advancing anything? We have to have some sort of agreed upon standardized metrics. As individuals, communities, institutions, and governments implement the pillars of the national strategy, consistent measurement will be critical to better understanding the driving forces of connection and disconnection and how we can be more effective and efficient in addressing these states. Public understanding of the essential role of social connection in health and well-being is critical to this pillar. Social connection should be included as a key driver of health and formal health education from elementary to professional school curricula. Again, this is my favorite point from all of the 6 pillars from the Surgeon General. With more knowledge, with more access to knowledge comes more solutions to the problem, whether that's on a government level or an entrepreneurial level. The more knowledge that we have, the more awareness that's created, and then the more ability that we have to look at the data and parse through that and look at and actually track and measure that data across time based on certain things that we've done. And then measuring those things that we've done and saying like, okay, that did or did not positively affect this loneliness crisis. That's the kind of stuff that I think is ultimately what's going to help solve it, especially from a government standpoint. To correlate the cigarette problem again, it's ultimately what helps solve it. It was only after the data started coming in that the research was done, and it was made very, very brutal and publicly available to everybody that was smoking at that time. And then with enough knowledge, with enough information, with enough resources, the peer pressure ended up kind of switching to discouraging people from smoking rather than encouraging people to start smoking. Now, unfortunately, it's switched to, vaping and stuff like that, which I'm not convinced is really any better than smoking cigarettes, but that's a whole different topic. But the point is, we need more information about the causes, the preventions, and the remedies of the epidemic of loneliness. And then the government and local communities, pastors, leaders in those communities, entrepreneurs, all of us together can get started solving the problem more efficiently. And so I think this is one of the key points of this entire thing, is to deepen our knowledge, and especially as the government, policymakers, researchers, all those people coming together to help us all figure out the root causes and what we can do to help solve some of these things, because it's still so elusive. And hopefully in the next few weeks, I actually just picked up 6 or 7 books on like friendship and connection written by different, PhDs and stuff like that. And then I'm going to go through that over the next few weeks, and we're going to start talking about that here on the show. So hopefully some of that stuff will become a little bit more apparent as we go throughout this, because some of these social psychologists have studied some of these things. But that being said, the only reason I found all of this material is because I started looking for it purposefully so I could talk about it here on the show. It's not, readily and actively available for anybody, and especially not from what they're saying. Social connection should be included as a key driver of health and formal health education from elementary to professional school curricula. It's like, yes, absolutely, 100% on board with that. It should be thrown into the health curriculum because it's like not even as an afterthought, as like a big core focus, because it is like we've seen, it's the foundation for happiness, for better physical health, for better emotional health, better mental health, and it can help solve a lot of those problems. Pillar number 6, cultivate a culture of connection. A culture of connection rests on core values of kindness, respect, service, and commitment to one another. Everyone contributes to the collective culture of social connection by regularly practicing these values. Advancing this culture requires individuals and leaders to seek opportunities to do so in public and private dialogue, schools, workplaces, and in the forces that shape our society, like media and entertainment, among others. Behaviors are both learned from and reinforced by the groups we participate in and the communities we're a part of. Thus, the more we observe others practicing these values, the more they will be reinforced in us. This is probably my biggest takeaway from this pillar. All types of leaders and influencers, national, local, political, cultural, corporate, can use their voices to underscore these core values and model healthy social connection and dialogue. Media and entertainment shape our beliefs through the depiction of stories. These narratives can also help individuals see themselves in stories and help to reduce stigma, thus enabling more connection. This is what we owe to each other. As citizens, as people who are all struggling from this epidemic. Kindness, respect, empathy. We as leaders, citizens, podcasters, workers, social workers, parents, teachers, etc. We all have to show up and model how we should be treating each other. And I know I'm going to piss probably bunch of people off with this one on both sides. But here we go. I try not to engage in politics too often because it just puts me in such a negative state. And I think that I have ultimately more control over what goes on in my personal life than the government's going to be able to have. So I try to stay out of it most of the time. But I think this is the biggest problem with the presidential elections in the last few election cycles, including this one. I think a great example of this was the stark contrast between the presidential debates and the vice presidential debate. One was done with gotcha journalism, vitriol, slander, just overall contentiousness, and it just felt like reality TV politics instead of actual politics. And I know that those lines can sometimes be blurred, but especially nowadays, it feels like that so much. And in my opinion, the highest office in the land should be shouldering the burden of setting a good example here and leading entire groups of people to be hating each other through their examples of how to treat somebody when you disagree with them. I think it's detrimental. I think it's detrimental on both sides. And hopefully after this election, we can get to, back to what the vice presidential debate looked like. There was actually some mutual respect, some empathy. It was like thoughtful yet combative commentary. Like it's okay to disagree with people, but it's also better to treat those people with respect and with empathy. And so hopefully we can get back to something like that. In the meantime, it's just going to be on all of us. We are going to be the leaders. We're going to be the people that are going to shoulder this burden for a little while longer. So hopefully we can get back to something that resembles respect and empathy once the 2024 election is all done and over with. Now, we have a few minutes left, so let's go ahead and jump into a question from last week. And by the way, if you're new to the show, DM me on Instagram at Travis Chappell with any questions that you have that we can answer here on the show, or just email me travis@travischappell.com. But this question came from Amber Faruqi, Amber Farooqui. She says, how do you set boundaries with your clients who become your friends? And then she has a follow-up. How do you make genuine friendships in entrepreneurship? So let's tackle that first one, okay? This one's admittedly for the entrepreneurs, business owners out there. It might even be more applicable for you, for those of you who have like a coaching program where you sell information, you're consulting, you have coursework or something like that. But I'm gonna try to answer it in a way that's gonna apply to everybody. I remember back when I first started in the entrepreneurial space online, and I was at this mastermind, which is essentially, if you haven't heard of that before, it's basically just like a group of people that are paying to be in a group of high-level entrepreneurs. And then typically there's little events that they do and they bring in speakers and stuff. And so I was in one of those, and they brought in a speaker, really well-known guy in the space and really outside of the space as well. If I said his name, most of you listening would know exactly who I'm talking about. But he was in this room. There's probably like 50 of us. And he said to keep a separation between you and your clients because there should be a perception of your celebrity in order for them to keep paying you. And it was something that it just never really sat well with me. Even when I was first starting, I was just like, I always love learning from other people. That's probably my favorite way to learn, is by getting around people. Again, networking, relationships, getting around people who've been there, done that, and can help me avoid some of those obstacles along the way has always been my favorite way to learn. So when this person was up on, doing this Q&A for the group, I was all ears. I was paying very, very close attention. I was writing down as much as I could. Because the way that this particular person built their business was exactly the way that I wanted to build mine. But when they said that, something just didn't resonate with me. I didn't get into this business to build a perception of celebrity so people treat me differently. I got into it so I could legitimately try to help people. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that doesn't seem like I'm actually really helping people. And I mean, I see where it's coming from, because when people become close friends through working with you, like if that's the first connection point that you had was them becoming a client or a customer of yours, people tend to just want more free stuff. And then they feel kind of weird paying for your time if you're friends, because sometimes they hang out with you for free. And then other times it's like more directed, and it can kind of feel weird and awkward to continue asking for money when you're doing the work for the money. So here's how I look at it now. And this goes for any entrepreneur that makes friends with their customers or clients, not just coaches, whether you're servicing somebody's, HVAC system or selling them solar or taking care of their plumbing, or you're fixing their car, whatever it is, coaching them on mindset. This is gonna apply to you, because everybody's been, especially entrepreneurs, you get put in that awkward position where just because somebody knows you, they're asking for these massive discounts and things like that. So first of all, I would say this: set the culture. The culture is on you, not just within your company, internally with employees and things, but also with your customer base, with your client base. And so in my actions, with my culture, I try to push the idea that friends should always be willing to support each other's ventures. So friends should actually not be the ones that are asking for discounts. Your friends should be the ones that should be asking to pay full price because they want to support what you're doing. And if you set that culture ahead of time, people will know not to ask you for that stuff, because you're well-spoken on what your expectations are from that relationship going forward. So try to combat some of this ahead of time and take the preventative approach and get ahead of this by just talking about stuff like this every once in a while. It doesn't have to be implemented into your copy on your sales page or anything like that. But I do think that it's helpful to just keep that dialogue open and talk about stuff like that, and encourage your clients and your customers to think about it that way as well. So set the culture where it is more likely that friends will help and support you because they want to help and support you, not because they're trying to get some sort of a discount or a break on something. Number two, think like a therapist. And I think therapists, they do this really well. They're professionals. But even if they've been working with somebody for a really long time, they know the difference between like friendship time and billable hours. So most of them keep those things completely separate. That also means that they probably don't end up with as many friends at the end of the day, because there's a clear line between friendship and their clients. And in that type of a setting, especially in therapy, you have to do it that way, in a lot of senses. But most businesses are not that way, where there's going to be this hard line. But if you think a little bit more like a therapist in that regard, it's like, look, this thing that we're doing in this context, this is clearly just us hanging out as friends, right? We were both at an event, and there's an after party in this one place, and we're hanging out, we're drinking beer together. That's obviously, we're in a friendship context. But if we're talking about some stuff and then we mention something about something you need help with in this area that I've been coaching you with, or that I've been helping you with, or in this, service industry that I've been doing for you, and then it requires follow-up and requires more additional work from you, you just have to be clear that, like, look, this is paid work. This is not paid work. And it's up to you to, like, where you want to draw those lines. But I do think the lines should be drawn. So think like a therapist, while understanding that you're, unless you are a therapist, that you're not a therapist, and that those therapists will not become friends with their clients because that's just something that they can't do. But it is something that you can do. So you have to come up with those lines yourself, and then just be adamant about keeping those lines. Now, I will say this. I've also had people who would not work with me, send me business, be friends with me, unless I was willing to pay them to be a part of their group or whatever. That is toxic to me. If you think that I'm good at what I do, and you think that your clients, your friends, your relationships and your business, that they could directly benefit from using me, from buying my products or investing in my services, then it's your moral obligation to make introductions to me to help them do that. If you're going to gate all of your entire network until I'm willing to pay you 40 grand to be a part of your group and to have the blessing of your referral base, like, I don't need it. You know why? Because as soon as I stop paying you the money, you're also going to stop sending me anybody. You're not in this to be helpful. You're in this just to make the money that you want to make. And if that's how you want to do business, fine, do business that way. But I am not going to do business with somebody like that, because they're drawing the line is like way too hard of a line. And the best people that I've paid for their time, attention, to be a part of their group, or to get actual formal coaching from, the best ones have been people who've continued to be willing to help beyond the scope of our initial agreed upon time frame. Because again, it's different if you're not good at what you do. That's a little different. If it also means that you have to be competent and that you have to take care of the people that they send you. But the best people that I've had are friends of mine now, and to this day, who I haven't paid in 2 years to be a part of any group or whatever. But I got into that group, and I was put on that person's radar because I was willing to pay to learn from them, because I genuinely valued their advice. But then afterwards, if they keep this whole thing up where it's like, I'd love to refer somebody over to you, but you haven't paid me. It's like, okay, well, I'll pay you a referral on that person. But like, if we're friends, we're friends. If we're not, we're not. But I'm not just going to continue paying you so that we can have a fake friendship, quote unquote, just so that I can, have the privilege of getting business from you. So number 3, have an ascension model that lets people graduate from you. So this is kind of leaning directly on that last point that I finished with. It's important to have space in your business for people to move up. Obviously, if you're doing something like this, or it's a free podcast or something like that, you're giving away free information, you want to get paid at some point. So you have something a little bit higher than that. Maybe it's $27, $97, something for people to engage with you on a lower level. And then if you then have the ability for them to graduate into group coaching that's maybe $5 grand, $6 grand, or something like that, it gets them a little bit more of your time. Then you have one-on-one coaching, and that's 20 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever it is, whatever that looks like for you, for your business. Then do those things and be okay with doing those things. Have an ascension model that allows people to continue to work with you, for sure, but also have an ascension model that gets people to graduate from needing your help anymore. If I'm working with somebody on solving a problem and they're paying me to help them solve that problem, and they're still paying me 7 years later, it tells me that their problem hasn't been solved yet. And I haven't done a very good job of helping them solve that problem. The people that you're working with, especially if you're in info space, they should be graduating from you. They should be learning as much as they can from you, and then they should be ascending into somebody else's program or going to learn from somebody else, or they should be enacting those things that you've been helping them with into their business, into their podcast, into that area that you're helping them improve. And if they're continually paying you year after year after year after year after year, it's like, well, what am I doing wrong here? There should be a way for them to ascend out of this and just become a friend of mine at some point, because I think that speaks to the ineffectiveness of your program. If you're just trying to, make them keep paying you forever, even though you're not actually helping them. So, you are not the key to their happiness. You are not the key to their success. You are an accessory. You're helping them reach their goal, but ultimately they're going to be the ones that are going to have to do the work. And your goal should just be to help them foster constant learning, change, and growth from having worked with you. So hopefully that's helpful, Amber. Then we're going to move on to your second question. I think it's more broadly applicable to most people that are listening to this. How do you make genuine friendships in entrepreneurship? It can be a bit tricky, and this is for entrepreneurship, but also in your career. Really, I'm treating this question more like, how do you make friends in a professional setting, not just as entrepreneurs. But most people in this world are fed this 1980s version of networking. Show up to the chamber meeting, have 1,000 hot off the press business cards, wear your name tag proudly, and then go around, throw your card in as many faces as you can, barf out your elevator pitch as quickly as you can, move on to the next person. And people get taught to treat it like an in-person cold calling event rather than a chance to foster connection and a relationship with people. And that makes for really, really shaky friendships because it's based on expected future value, which will inevitably fall apart because mismanaged expectations are the foundation for lack of gratitude. So the best friends that I personally have found in entrepreneurship are not just those who can directly benefit from knowing me or vice versa. They're friends who sometimes have nothing to do with my industry, my field, or anything that I do, but can at least just understand the nature of my work and empathize with the journey. So they're maybe to do something completely different. And we don't really have much of a similar customer base. We're not going to be sending each other business that often, if ever. But we both at least understand each other. We both at least understand the stress of hiring an employee that didn't work out and having to get rid of them. We understand what it's like to have to make payroll. We can speak the same language. We can foster a relationship based on mutual connection, based on mutual hardship and obstacles, without having to do like direct business with each other. And to be clear, I have a lot of those friends too. Friends who we do a lot of business together. They're just kind of in a different category in my mind most of the time. They're not the quote unquote genuine friendships that you're asking about in your question. They're more business partnerships, and they thrive on the mutual value that we both receive from knowing each other. Now, there's nothing wrong with those, but they're friendships because they're based in that mutual value from being able to make money off of each other. They're also really flaky because when you encounter failure, when you hit roadblocks, when you come across obstacles, those people will no longer be there because it's no longer financially advantageous for them to be there, and they're going to drop you like a bad habit. And again, it's not even necessarily a bad thing. You can't be close, genuine friends with everybody you do business with. It's impossible. That's just the type of relationship that you have with them. So recognizing that as the type of relationship that you have with them, and reacting based on your knowledge of that relationship is going to help you deal with it if and when those times come and those people drop off the face of the planet. So just know that that's going to be a tough time, with some of those people. The genuine friendships are the ones that stick with you through those times. They maybe offer advice or just a listening ear. They're willing to just go hang out with you and hear about the struggles that you encountered and why this business is going bankrupt or why you are losing this money or the intricacy of the deal that fell apart that you lost a ton of money on and now you're discouraged and wondering if you can do it. And these are the people that are going to sit with you through all of that. They're going to listen to you, maybe provide feedback for whatever next venture you have in mind that you're incubating, because they're in it for you. They're in it for the relationship with you. They're not in it for the money that you made them. And they understand as well that a failure is part of the journey. So they understand that, hey, maybe you got knocked off your horse this time around, but I know the type of person that you are, and you're going to get back up on that horse. And I want to be one of those people that was able to help support you during that time when you were on the ground, because those are the people that are actual, real, genuine friendships. So those friendships are going to be cultivated the same way that regular friendships are going to be cultivated. They're people with whom you have more in common with than the fact that you're both business owners. This is where it bleeds into things like mission, vision for your life, not just a business, your core values that you have in your life. Those are going to be those mutual connection points that are more, sticky. And think of it this way. If you're having trouble visualizing who those people are in your life, okay, imagine having a conversation with each person after a big failure. You filed bankruptcy, something like that, shut down your business, lost a bunch of money. And if you told them those things about you, about the things that you're going through, that person would not think any differently of you because of the things that you're going through. They know you're going to get back up on the horse, like I said earlier. They know, like, and trust you because of who you are, not because of how you can benefit their bottom line. And look, it should only be a few people. This should not be a list of 300 people. It's impossible. That's not how it works. If you're trying to be that close with that many people, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And they're going to be sorely disappointed because you can't possibly feed that many relationships on that deep of a level. It's impossible. So think about it. And if there's too few people in that category or too many people in that category, it means you have a little bit of work to do. I'd recommend, especially if you don't have that many people and you're wanting to go try to build this type of friendship with others, connect with them on other things besides just business. Now, if you're a business person and you're an entrepreneur and you like talking about those things, a lot of your conversation is probably going to lean into those things. But build connection off of other mutual shared interests, golf or time with family or fitness or running or something like that. The best entrepreneurship-based friends that I have are friends who I can work out with, travel to events with, watch random bullshit with, watch a basketball game with, play basketball with, like something like that. They're friends who I've cultivated, and our connection point was entrepreneurship and business, sure, but it's also so much more than that. And most importantly, it's really based on our values, who we are as people, the things that we hold close and hold dear in life. And that's really all friendship. All friendship comes from mutual values, shared experiences, memories, and then quantity and quality of time. So the advice is the same for building friendships in general. Just set up times to connect outside of work around common interests and make an effort to connect with those people on those things. Not just like, oh, we had another record-breaking month. And it's like, cool, but if people just like you because you had a record-breaking month, what happens when you inevitably don't have a record-breaking month? Who's going to be sticking around? Who's actually in your corner? So that is it for today's episode. I appreciate you all. Remember, if you want to have a no agenda chat with me just for connection, just to get to know each other a little bit better, I'm trying to free up time on my calendar to do just that. Just go to travischappell.com/chat. For a free phone call just to get to know each other a little bit more. Also, if you're in Las Vegas, be sure to stop by my wife and I's new Everbowl locations, acai bowl shop. It's delicious, super refreshing. Grab some healthy smoothies or acai bowls or something like that, and we can connect in person sometime over there. Just mention that you heard about the store here on the show. It's the one off of Grand Canyon in South Summerlin on the 215 in Flamingo. Let them know that you got sent there from Travis Makes Friends on the podcast, and I will make sure that they get you something free just for stopping by. So that's it for today's show. Remember to leave every relationship better than you found it. Catch you on the next episode. Peace out.